try not to get in love with speed at all cost and getting things done quickly. Although I know there's obviously this big love for like 80%, half is better than 100%. I prefer to have something that is balanced a little bit, like strong foundational, like I said, system, data, orgs. And then once you have the foundation of the car almost right, then you go full speed, right? But I've never seen, in my experience, success at zigzagging your way through things. It plays a toll on people. I haven't seen the results that working that way.
Welcome to Experimental, the podcast that cuts through the noise to bring you actionable insights in B2C growth, marketing, and data science. I'm your host, Sundar, former head of brand data science at Uber and the mind behind the Experimental newsletter. Join me as I talk with industry leaders who have driven growth at companies like Uber, Spotify, and Netflix. We'll uncover the experiments, failures, and breakthroughs that lead to real results. Now, let's get experimental. Today, my guest is Mattia Santin. He's a Senior Vice President of Brand Growth and Operations at ContentSquare. He joined there from being the CMO of Hotjar and has had other marketing leadership roles at companies like Atita, Levy, and Uber. Today, we're going to talk about B2B versus B2C and all the differences. And he's just a fantastic marketer that I'm excited to have. With that, Mattia, welcome to Experimental.
Thank you much for having me, Sundar. I appreciate it.
Yes, it's great to have you. And like I said, let's jump into the fact that you started off in B2C, then went to B2B. I'd love to hear about everything you've observed, why you made the change, and just, what you're seeing now.
First of all, thanks for having me again. Great to meet you again and chat. When it comes to the trajectory of my career, it's a bit of there's definitely always that marketing theme, but with a bit of schizophrenia, as in I love change. I'm intrigued and definitely get bored very quickly if I'm not challenged. So you can kind of see in my experience, I've been within the marketing realm, which is my passion, but still kind of a few phases there, working a little bit in starting with e-commerce, with SEO being my first love. And then from there, like brands like Adidas, Vista brand, Tommy Hilfiger, Calvin Klein, and kind of all that in the growth realm, right? So with a bit of a channel marketing, email marketing, SEO, paid media, your typical foundational channels. From that, Uber definitely was the big pivot into technology, and still within the B2C realm, of course. Again, growing into online media and offline media, so out of home, TV, etc. Within the EMEA remit for both the Uber for Uber, Uber Eats, Uber for Business, and Jump, our scooter line at the time. And then jumping into startup scale-ups, still within B2C. Hotjar has been my first jump into B2B. So it didn't really feel like a big change considering all the different changes from retail, e-com, mobility, health. So for me, it was just another different opportunity to learn something new, something different. Now it's been almost 3 years in B2B. I made recently a post on LinkedIn about it, so which probably sparked a little bit of this conversation as well. It's been fascinating to observe a lot more similarities than people think. But also, what I've also shared in my post a few months back, definitely not a lot of cross-pollination between the two in the talent pool. I've noticed a lot of my colleagues have never worked in B2C. And when I say a lot, I'm talking probably in the 90% of my colleagues or peers or teams have not had that B2C experience, which is fascinating because the learnings that I had for B2C are absolutely translatable when it comes to B2B. Obviously, there's a little bit of mindset shift where you're still marketing to people, to humans. You still have an objective of driving action, a conversion. The channels they use for growth and acquisition are very similar. Yes, the timing is a bit different, right? Obviously, if you're familiar with B2C or e-com, you have your typical 28 days measurement. Your conversion happens in instance sometimes. So that's probably the only one big difference. But a lot of the different other things are similar. So it was fascinating to kind of noticing the similarities, but at the same time, noticing also how far people seems to be from the two different realms.
Yeah, so many questions I want to follow up on. But first, going back to your earlier career, when you were, making these changes throughout your journey, did you feel like you were, quote, running away from something or, running towards that you wanted to learn? Like, how did you think about the next move?
Yeah, great question. At the very beginning, I was probably as very young people, a lot of immature, as in I was just wanting to have some fun, having a cool job, and obviously get the first paychecks in the bank to spend, as at the very early as we all do, and then quickly with some self-reflection, some coaching, having been lucky to have great mentors and managers, quickly realizing that the passion of mine was obviously to learn new things. So change was always going to be a part of my path. I knew since the beginning that I was not going to be in companies for like 18 years, 15 years, right? Which again, no judgment. Obviously, I know a lot of great people that have been that long in great companies and been super successful. I just knew that that was not going to be my path. So that was a quick realization at the very beginning. The second, I wanted to be challenged. I have this probably undiagnosed ADHD that requires me to be always on my toes a little bit and move fast. So having something that was not challenging was definitely not going to be something that would make me feel successful. So every time I kind of changed role or company, probably because I felt comfortable, right? And I made that self realization, and I was like, okay, this is time to go. And then the third one, I've been lucky enough never to leave a company, but always to jump into something exciting. So the Uber example was by luck after having spent a few years in retail, e-com, Adidas, and Tommy and Calvin Klein. I knew I wanted some of change and moving away from that e-com fashion silos that I was getting myself into. Once again, about the comfort element. So Uber came in Amsterdam, offering this job, which started originally as an organic lead for EMEA, then became a media lead for EMEA with all the paid media budget comes with it. So that came organically through connections and through LinkedIn. And then from there, jumping into Libby, which was basically a 40 people startup in France, was another chance to happen. It just felt at the right time. So lucky enough never to leave a job, which I think is important. You can't always make that work. Sometimes you have to, unfortunately. But that a lot of chance, a lot of coincidence, a lot of like networking. I think was definitely key element. Talking to people, helping startups, networking with people such as yourself, always helped in this roadmap so far.
When you then became the CMO of, for example, Hotjar, right? I think it's a very different type of skill set. Like, what did you feel that transition was like?
It depends on what the title means for people. Like I'm always, no matter working for Adidas, which was 80,000 people employees, or Uber thousands, or Levy 40 people. I'm always being the person that no matter the title, no matter the reporting lines, no matter the team size, I want to be in trenches. I want to be an IC, right? So I've always been involved in the day-to-day action, not everywhere. Obviously, it's not physically possible, but helicoptering into the stuff that I knew that I had either an ability to contribute or a desire to learn more or a clear need for the team to help. Right. So I knew that no matter VP, CMO, or manager, didn't matter to me. I knew that I was good at solving puzzles, or at least coaching the team to solve puzzles. Like often I'm not the smartest guy in the room. And I know that Uber, for example, is a great example of being with the smartest people I've worked ever with, and something about it. And I knew that I was not going to be the smartest person in the room. But I had this, if I one superpower that I've been told, is the ability to bring people together and kind of figure out a problem, putting into a way that people can manage and solve it together, right? So that's always been my approach to things. So Hotjar has been nothing different. So I stepped into a company that had an amazing culture and a definitely interesting problem to solve, because Hotjar still to this day has an amazing brand reputation and brand awareness. But obviously, with high competition coming in from Microsoft with Microsoft Clarity, obviously evolutions in the market, in the industry, economic situation impacting B2B SaaS in general. So it was an interesting time to pivot into a different way. And Hotjar never had a CMO before, so there's also that element of like bringing a little bit of that maybe expertise and seniority that I gathered from Uber and other companies before. So the approach really wasn't different. It was more about crystallizing it probably took me about 30 days or so to realize the crystallizing difference that I told you earlier between B2C and B2C, realizing actually a lot of things are similar, and implementing some of the kind of the ideas and the strategies that we put together with the team on taking Hotjar to the next level. Then obviously the recent shift in Hotjar and ContentSquare happened, which obviously it drove a little bit of change compared to what I expected. But yeah, that's a bit of like what I've seen.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying the podcast. Would you agree that most marketers don't know if their campaigns are working or not? That's why I created the experimental newsletter. It helps you cut wasted spend, optimize your marketing budget, and defend any of your decisions in a boardroom. Start with the free version or go deeper with premium insights reserved for paid subscribers. Scan the QR code or click the link in the description to join now. Let's get back to the episode. There's so many threads that I want to pull on. So I want to start with you helicopter in as a CMO, and I love that term, right? Like you're going into the trenches, which a lot of leaders might not do. What are you looking for? What's your sort of plan of attack? How do you think about, where to identify the biggest challenge?
I mean, the first thing definitely I mean, a bit of a cliche, but I spend as much time as possible talking to people, especially if the team is already formed. That's what I always do, right? I've had, again, the beauty and the luck of having worked in so many companies, and maybe for not too long, is that I've seen so many different things, as in working in-house teams, working agency led, hybrid models, working as well into at Uber was completely agency led. Then we in-housed everything. So also seeing that transition. I've also came in all roles where the team was already set. So I inherited that. And that was the case at Hotjar. The team before I joined shifted from a squad model to a functional model. So kind of inherit that setup, and spending a lot of time understanding the history, spending a lot of time understanding the vision of the CEO, and also the numbers. I would say, I mean, very cliche, but that's really what works. You have to go down into the trenches also in the numbers and understanding and making your own assessment of what you're seeing, right? And then the second is, I think, with humility, try to set up a vision, especially coming from B2C. I think I used a lot of humility at the beginning and say, look, there's a lot of stuff that I'm not going to know from the get go. Again, only afterwards I realized actually the similarity is much higher than I originally thought. But starting with a few assumptions, and then realizing the strength, and capitalize the strength over maybe solving problems. That's probably much. That's also what I've seen, and the odds are much easier for me to capitalize on that brand awareness, on that community that Hotjar had, but probably not as utilized as it could have, rather than solving, how do we tackle competition, which is inevitable? How do we tackle like Microsoft coming in with a free product, right? How do we tackle maybe some of the pain points that we had? So that's kind of how I got to it, and how I typically tackle every new job is first focusing on the people, the data, the maximizing the strengths, and then solving the problems. Because that's in that order, typically how I think about it.
Yeah, and one thing you had said was a squad to functional change. Can you unpack that a bit? What does that transition look like? What is the differences there?
Squad was actually something that the team was working with before I joined. So when the CEO at the time of Hotjar hired me, actually during the interview process, which going back to the coincidence, really lasted like a week, because I was close to accept another offer until he swapped me off my feet at the last minute. But over that interview process and a few weeks afterwards, I basically, yeah, actually in the business case for the role, I actually pitched how I would structure the team. In my experience, I'm not typically a fan of squad setup. I know it can work well. I found the squad setup for a marketing team to have a lot of pros into the alignment with product, obviously, right? Because obviously that you can match the different phases of the product journey with marketers, etc. But I find it also a bit risky to create in terms of creating silos within your marketing organization, right? So because obviously you're creating kind of like involuntary walls in between different stages of the squad's teams, etc. So you obviously create teams that can work very efficiently within the squad, very quickly in unison with product, but you have the risk of having that, like I said, breakage points or walls between your marketing team. So I've been more exposed to the matrix setup or functional setup. So that's how I, by the way, set it up at Uber, for example, where I was managing media. This is how I was trying to set it up also at Hotjar before some of the recent changes with ContentSquare happened, where I do believe in functional knowledge and expertise within marketing. So having experts in media, experts in content, expert in SEO, those are skill set that typically in the past how marketers would start, right? We can talk about how kind of the future looks like in my opinion, but this is how your typical learning journey started. I want to capitalize on those expertise, and at the same time having a few functional leaders at the horizontal level, kind of making sure that we had the right direction set and coordination between different functions. So I always give the example of a car, and my team at Uber probably, if you listen to this, be bored as heck to listen to me for like a million times saying it, but it's the example of the steering wheel and the engine, right? The engine is your functional leaders and teams, is your paid media team, is your out of home or offline media team, is your measurement potentially if you want to, and then you have your steering wheel, which is your strategy team, the team that maybe is the one connecting with outside stakeholders. So almost you want to have a engine that is unbothered, runs like a charm, super efficient, and keeps improving the mileage. And then you have your steering wheel, who is the one that sets the direction, is your navigation, is system, is your GPS, right? And also is the one communicating to the rest of the company what we're doing, how we're doing, etc. I don't want to distract the engine, and you need both, right? You need a great steering wheel you need a great engine. So that's kind of, it's complex. So it requires a lot of, this goes back into, it requires a CMO or a leader that comes in the details often to make sure that a bit of oil is set in the right direction, and there's no friction because it's natural in any matrix organization. But I've seen more success there if you have the right talent, if the right culture of openness and feedback and transparency and communication over maybe a squad, which personally I have a little experience with to begin with, but also I haven't seen functioning as well as I would like in other setup.
You keep saying things that I want to circle back to, but then you keep saying new things that I really want to keep digging into, and I love it. So, on the steering wheel engine analogy, right? So, how do you connect that strategy to make sure the engine knows the strategy and that the strategy, understands the feedback from the steering wheel and the engine? How do you do that as a CMO?
First of all, it starts with the people, really. Like three things, sorry. People, as in you have to write the right talent to be able to do these things, right? You have to make sure that your steering wheel trusts the engine and the engine starts the steering wheel. If there's a lack of trust from anywhere in the car, breaks start to happen, right? So that's one thing. Second of all, so people and talent. The second one is the direction. The direction needs to be clear. Like you don't want to have a car that goes zigzag in your way. So you as CMO or leader of this entity needs to make sure that at all point everybody's clear on where you're going, right? Because the steering wheel is not going to know. I feel like I keep going on the car example, but like your strategy team or the folks driving kind of the direction, they need to have the bigger picture in mind and understand where you're going, right? And if you keep changing your mind, they're going to suffer, and the end is going to suffer, and the whole thing collapses. So I think the biggest thing as a leader in marketing, you have to ask yourself, how clear is the direction at the top, even from your CEO? Because if that direction keeps changing, you're not going to be able to set a clear direction for your team either, right? I'll be without ignoring kind of what comes from the top, which obviously you really don't want to do. So then you might want to rethink this structure that I just told you about, because probably a little bit too, if you wish, unflexible. So there are other ways, right, in that situation. So every company is different, every culture is different, right? I gave you this example for when you want to create foundations, when you have, in the Uber example, great talent, great direction, you know where you're going, just a matter of like executing fast, right, with clear ROI. And then the third one is about measurement and data, right? This whole thing does not work if your systems and data is not, basically decent. Otherwise, once again, it creates lack of trust within the people. It creates unclarity on the results and the ROI. I mean, it goes back into, you can talk org structures all you want and team talent all you want, but if you don't have the foundations and the data to back everything up, then is the old castle collapse.
Okay, so we've now talked about the difference between B2C and B2B quite a bit, and I really want to go a bit deeper on that. So, and you've also provided this framework of thinking through people, strategy, measurement across all of these lanes, almost like in a matrix way. How does B2B differ from B2C, or how is it more similar than we might think also?
I mean, the first things come to mind is the speed, right? So speed is a big one. So working in B2C for like, retail e-com, where you have your like campaigns that you have to execute, right? You have clear deadlines and you have like numbers to go. And again, the conversion flow is very, very short, from like, an instant when you want to download an app, right, from a advertising that you've created, all the way to a conversion that, purchase conversion of a pair of sneakers that can last, a few days or even a day, right? So versus a B2B example where, especially if you're talking enterprise, can last for like months, right? From the first touch points to the obviously collaboration between the marketing team and the sales team, into the conversion, into creating a lead, into obviously converting the lead into an opportunity, and then obviously into a signed contract, can take months and months and months. B2B by itself also, and B2C obviously have hard to generalize B2B versus B2C, right? Within B2B, you obviously have everything from SMB to enterprise, vastly different, which obviously between PLG and SLG. In B2C as well, you have, like as I said, you have the examples of, instant conversion to 28 days conversion as well. So the first one is speed. The second one is around the connection between product and marketing, and the critical importance of product marketing. Now, you obviously have product and product marketing in B2C organization as well. Again, I'm only speaking from my experience, so I can't say this is accurate and reliable and true for every company. But I've seen a lot more importance in the role of product marketing within a B2B organization than within B2C. the connection, like, first of all, where does it sit? Does product marketing sit in marketing? Does product marketing sit in product? I think that's like the $1 million question every time. And I think there's no silver bullet for it. There's no simple solution. Some CMOs are going to be tell you like it has to sit in marketing. Some CPOs, they'll tell you it has to sit in product. The truth is that it doesn't matter really where it sits as long as that connection works. So that's a critical breakage points in the, I'd say, in the company success if that team and that connection doesn't work efficiently, because just a vastly important connecting of turning that product vision into a comms, into conversion, into a marketing story, into content, and the other way around, to gathering the input from what marketing sees into the development of the product. Not, do you build for your customers? Do you build for your ICPs? Like, who do you build for? Like, all that stuff obviously is critical. So I would say the role of product marketing and the relationship between marketing and product much more important in B2B, sorry, than B2C. From my experience, once again, I've seen a lot more closeness to it. I've seen a lot more risk of messing things up if that's not done properly, and a lot more forgiveness in B2C. Like, from my ecom days, rarely, if at all, talk to product, right? Like, the producer or the producer of the shoes or the shirts or whatever you may be. Yes, we had a merchandising team, but we're mostly a buying team, right? So obviously they were buying for the ecom store. So it was mostly like, okay, here's the products, buy what you want, and then we would sell it. Uber was a little bit different, as you probably remember. Obviously we were a little bit more connecting to the go-to-market strategy. So we were starting also toward the end of my adventure there, of building more and more that connection. But again, vastly different between B2C and B2B. B2B much, much more closer. These are kind of like the two things I've seen different. In general, the similarities are into how you acquire customers, or you communicate. Like, the channels are exactly the same. You're still marketing to people. You still have the same pain points around measurement, right? Like, what attribution do you use? You use last touch. You use first touch. What do you do? How do you measure ROI? How do you measure CAC? Like, all the stuff is absolutely the same. It looks different. It may appear different, but the foundation of the problem is the same. Your channels are the same. You have your meta. You have your search. You have your SEO. Again, all of that is the same. Going back into all your learnings from B2C in channel and growth marketing are applicable in B2B,
Mhm.
especially, once again, if you're talking B2C and PLG slash SMB B2B, like, spot on. If you're talking enterprise, yes, it's slightly different because of the speed. There's a bigger involvement, obviously, of the collaboration with your sales team, with your revenue teams that obviously you had in B2C, which are non-existent. But the foundations and the fundamentals are basically the same. So that's kind of like what I've seen as in similarities and differences.
As a marketing scientist, I would love to get much deeper on attribution, but I think for my audience, I think what would be interesting is the product marketing relationship that you mentioned. Like, so are you building roadmaps together? What does that dynamic look like at B2B? Like, maybe if you could share an example at your time at Hotjar or ContentSquare of like, why that relationship was so different.
Sure. Look, when I'll give you the Hotjar example. So Hotjar, obviously, as CMO, I also had product marketing within the team, and I think that team was critical. And I've seen also the shift between before I joined and after a year that I was there. When I joined, I've observed that team was basically focusing on taking whatever product would come with the newest thing they wanted to launch, and go to the rest of the marketing team and say, okay, guys, here's the new thing that we need to advertise, right, and go to market with and mention. But it was basically one-way street. Like, it was basically taking the input from the product and going into marketing and go for it. What I've tried to enable the product marketing team to do and challenge them a lot on is, has to be a both ways relationship. Like, we also need to go to product and say, hey, if you need true PLG motion, product needs to do the acquisition. It shouldn't be marketing. That doesn't mean, hey, I don't want to be accountable for it. Like, the numbers of traffic or conversion, new customer, obviously should be on marketing. But in true PLG fashion, which again, Hotjar was mostly focused on SMB and mid-market with a strong PLG self-serve motion at the time, product needs to be built in a way to acquire customers, right? And that's what PLG is intended to do. So product marketing should challenge the product team to do that. right? And keep reminding them of that and keeping feeding input and be a bit of on their side all the time to reminding them that's critical for marketing to be successful, for the company to be successful. So that's the first thing that I've tried to change a little bit. And then you could argue it was somewhat in B2C, like this regime was not really seen. Like I haven't seen it at least in this fashion, right? So I'd say that was the biggest thing. Again, for B2B PLZ, that's critical. For everything, obviously, enterprise focus on B2B, it's a little bit different. I think the role of product marketing is much more critical when it comes to the messaging element, the storytelling, the content. How do you go to market? Make sure that the value of your product is clearly articulated to your enterprise customer, like to your users, but most important to your decision makers as well, right? So I mean, this is why the role of product marketing is so important, right? So no matter in B2B, no matter if it's your PLG SMB motion for mid market, mid market, or if it's for enterprise, I've observed how important that team is, and how important it is to also make sure to support that team. They're going to have some stressful times. Number one, there's going to be a bit of a identity crisis. Is it a marketing team? Is it a product team? Oh, they want me here. No, they want me there. They need a lot of resilience because they're going to be pulled in different directions, and they will suffer tremendously if the strategy of the company is in evolution and change, right? Because they kind of sometimes they'll have to figure things out for themselves. So I would say that is that every marketer or as a CMO in a B2B company, hopefully, I think they will agree. Like that team is the one that really, really requires a lot of TLC. And the talent in the team is typically, I've observed also work quite high because of it as well. You need some senior people with a lot of experience and great resilience, and obviously, ability to communicate and work with others. So that's also probably the other difference that I've seen from B2C and B2B.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. One thing that I was just thinking about is like you oversee in your current role Heap, Hotjar, ContentSquare, and I know you have motions across SMB, mid market, enterprise. Like how does your head absorb all this and keep this in line?
Yeah, so basically, after about a year and a few months after, leaving Hotjar as a CMO, obviously the company decided to pivot and start merging the three companies with the recent acquisition of Heap, which happened in 2023. And obviously, with three companies going into what direction of building one product, which we're working on right now. I was asked to stay not anymore as CMO of Hotjar, but obviously it wasn't really necessary anymore, but rather as VP for brand and growth. So I'm overseeing to your point, the three brands across the three segments, two motions, focusing specifically on branding growth. So I'm not necessarily supporting any more product marketing or customer marketing. Nonetheless, it's a fun job because effectively, to your point, is about a lot about taking almost like wearing different hats every day, right? Obviously, with my B2C and PLG experience at Hotjar, I can contribute a lot to the other marketers who come specifically from ContentSquare only have maybe that enterprise experience, right? So that's still fun, obviously, to play. I'm quite involved in a lot of like customer marketing project or product marketing project that are more PLG or SMB mid market focused. And at the same time, learning obviously enterprise, which is something that I haven't done in the past, right? So I would say it reminds me a lot of the Uber days. And once again, I know we mentioned Uber a lot, obviously considering our backgrounds. But if you remember, Uber was a lot of like, okay, I'm thinking Uber for business at the moment. Okay, now I'm jumping to Uber rides. Even within the rides, I'm talking supply and then demand. With riders or drivers, and obviously, don't let me start with the eats, right? With also the careers element and the eaters. Like it's basically the same thing. I think a lot of it is training, right? Like I said, I've been lucky to have seen a lot of different companies and all different problems. So I cherish this. A lot of it is ability to jump from one thing to another and helicoptering, right? And say, okay, this is something that my team has it. Like, okay, let's move on to this one, right? And jumping on next project that I have to help with. And a lot of it is, like I said, maybe that the undiagnosed ADHD that keeps me like able to fly like a breeze on different flowers all the time. But jokes apart, a lot of it is about also making sure that the foundations are done properly, right? So that's one thing that we kind of touch upon a little bit in kind of my approach to marketing. But maybe that's my SEO first love background, which as you know, if you know SEO, yes, it's unstable. It changes every day. It's dead every other year, right? As people say. But at the same time, it's a strong foundational logical approach to it, right? You know how to like the importance of content. You know how do you the importance of building a sound website, the importance of your links, the importance of your reputation, the importance of obviously doing things technically, white hat, if that's even a term that people use anymore. That's my approach for things in marketing in general. Like I try not to get in love with speed at all cost, and getting things done quickly. Although I know there's obviously this big love for 80%, half is better than 100%. I prefer to have something that is balanced a little bit, like strong foundational, like I said, system, data, orgs. And then once you have the foundation of the car almost right, then you go full speed, right? But I've never seen, in my experience, success at zigzagging your way through things. It plays a toll on people. I haven't seen the results that maybe others have, at least working that way.
Thanks for sharing that. So instead of, 80/20 on everything, there's some things that you definitely should be 100% on, some things maybe a little less. And so the aggregate is 80/20, but there's yeah, some things that should be a little bit more.
Absolutely. I mean, that's you said it very well. It is about identifying the things where you're okay to go. You know what? I'll give you an example, right? So we at Hotjar, one of probably my funniest moment was the launch of our first and only in-person event, which we called Hot Sauce, which to this day I think is a fantastic name, which I credit my brand team for. That was part of the strategy of leveraging the community that Hotjar had and has at the time, right, to reignite the brand and to reignite that TLC and the love for Hotjar. We had like Mo, our CEO at the time, and I like had this crazy goal of doing a 2,000 in-person event, 2,000 people in-person event in New York with basically an 11 months runway to it, which if you ever run an event, if you're listening to it, this is nuts, right? Like you don't like if you're lucky to do a few hundreds, I think these for your first event ever, it's a success, right? So we went 2,000. Let's go nuts. We booked in an incredible location in New York, crazy expensive. We said, okay, let's go for it, and we quickly realized that was just dreams, right? Like it was not going to happen. So, I think I can share this one. We had a goal of 2,000 people joining us in November of 2023. At the time of July, I think we had like 200 or so. So like completely not gonna hit it. So we didn't discourage ourselves. We had obviously a go no go decision. We said, okay, we're gonna do this, but we're not gonna go 2,000. What is a realistic objective, right? 2,000 was clearly like shooting for the sky. It was not gonna happen. Let's go for a number. Let's go for 700. Okay. Again, a lot of people in the industry we talked to that organize events for years and years, they told us like, again, also crazy. And we went into like again daily work, go all in on it, speed, and execution, and we barely got close to it. So we got like 680 tickets, sold, a few less attendees in the end. So we didn't hit it, but that's not the point. The point is aim high, try to be bold and try to be bullish, and then do your best to go as close as possible and learn through it, right? So that's an example of like, okay, if we got 80, it's okay, right? But then you got to be 100 on the rest. You got to be 100 on your always on acquisition. You got to be 100 on your data measurement. You got to be 100 on making sure that your system work like that. That's an example of where you can take bold bets, but in a way calculated as well.
That's a great example. And I think it's consistent with some of the other marketing leaders I've had here that have said the same thing. Like these foundations, these measurements, especially in the modern marketing age, like have to be 100. And then it's about experimentation and sort of trying things out. I want to pivot to, we've shared that we both worked at Uber. You must have some really fun stories. One of them being an incrementality test that you ran, which, I love hearing about. Can you share a bit more about that story?
Sure. I mean, that has been to this day, I think the biggest, funnest, most impactful thing I've ever done in my life. I don't think it's going to be ever topped.
Wow, that's a great way to set this up. This is exciting.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is look. This is the context is the following. So, joined Uber as I mentioned as a head of organic, and then very quickly became basically head of media. So overseeing basically everything from SEO to all the paid media channels. Which in the end, just to give you a bit of more context, it was basically about 300 million of marketing budget on managed 45 markets, 4 verticals. Like again, best job from a scope. If you want complexity, here's our complexity, right? Um, and the team was small at the time. So when I joined, it was only at the time the rights business for transparency. So Eats was not there yet. It was the rights business in EMEA. And basically it was myself and I believe 4 people only and a lot of agencies, right? That's how Uber, as you know, was launched, right? CT managers and ops managers, obviously very, very quick, a small team going and was supported by externals or agencies to run marketing. So the vision obviously was to have a little bit of expertise within the central team in Amsterdam to run EMEA. So myself and a person in my team, Hannah Orani, who was leading at the time display. He recently moved from Uber into remote. So congrats again for Hannah for the shift. And Hannah, by the way, great talent. Going back to the element of having great functional leaders, he's an amazing talent within display ads and paid media. Both of us were looking at, again, in the first month or so of being there, we're looking at the numbers that Uber was spending and just mind boggled on the magnitude, right, of the weekly spend on channels and the weekly spend specifically on display advertising, right, to drive again the download of apps for the riders in EMEA. I'm not going to share numbers, but like again, I gave you the total amount that I was managing at the end, so you can do the math a little bit. And something did not feel right. You want to talk about changes? I was coming from companies where you were challenged on not spending, and now I was pushed by a lot of people to spend more. And when I say a lot of people, the local teams who want obviously to grow, obviously different times, right? Compared to like some of how VC works at the moment, money was available and definitely was desire to grow, right? So as a lead for media for EMEA, everybody was pushing me to spend more. It didn't feel right. In part because I never had that experience. In part because like I didn't feel comfortable in our measurement and our ability to actually understand truly ROI. And as you know, also Uber had a pretty tricky setup, as in how the rides conversion, especially in EMEA, and drivers conversion in EMEA was like so long and complicated. Nobody has built measurement for the mobility setup yet, right? So it was tricky. So Han and I discussed this, and we said, okay, why don't we do a test? Like, how do we know if this thing actually is incremental? How do we know if this thing actually drives revenue apart from like the numbers that we're seeing? So the idea was like, okay, why don't we go to Dimitri, who's Dimitri Gorkoti, who's been at Uber for 13 years now, I think, or more. I think he left recently Uber. Amazing leader. We went to him and say, hey, Pierre, like we don't feel comfortable in the number. We're spending a ton. Like, would you be okay if we stopped everything for a week? Hannah and I were talking about like we want to spend something, we want to be bold about it. We don't want to just like do small testing with all the different display ads or with our agency. We want to do something very crazy, which again unheard of, going back to the push that I was telling you earlier, and never done before at Uber. Going back into the importance of your leaders and the importance of your CEO, your senior leaders. I think the meeting lasted 30 minutes, and he was like, "Okay, do it." I was shocked once again of like the magnitude and how quickly the decision was taken to basically stop your investment for a week. We're talking millions, right, of investment. I can't tell you the details of what happened, but I can tell you that not much happened. Let's put it this way. So clearly, a lot of the spend was non-incremental, right? I'm telling you, in like ballpark it, like in the 70% was non-incremental. Like nothing changed,
Wow.
right? Now, obviously, like take that with a grain of salt. We're talking short term and not long term. Obviously, if you extend that test, if you extend that test in months, obviously you're going to have an impact. If you extend, but let's just say like the outcome of that was shocking, right? So that turned into a bigger case at the global level. So that was obviously quickly communicated to my peers in North America and into Asia, which then turned into a much bigger case. Hundreds of millions of dollars saved in the end of spend that was not necessarily saved, because obviously that was not our intention ever, but it was more about, okay, how do we drive impact and incrementality for every dollar that we have? And quickly we realized a couple of things. One, we didn't have the right way to attribute our conversion or our dollar spent to the channel. And second realization is that we were thinking too much on at the bottom of the funnel in terms of conversion, and not realizing actually helicoptering out enough to understand really how the funnel actually worked. I'll give you one example. In one country specifically in Europe, we gave up on paid media because our CAC was through the roof compared to other cities, other countries, and it just simply did not look profitable, right, to invest in that country. So it was like minimum, like we're spending these peanuts there just for the sake of it. And then we said, okay, why is that? Let's go deeper into it. We ran actually some analysis, some research. We've done some surveys, and clearly, again, I'll make the story a lot shorter, but we realized that a lot of the conversion had nothing to do with the ads, had nothing to do with the channels. Once again, as a marketing team, you're thinking, or a functional team, you're thinking, what's in your control? You're not thinking customers, just simply because you're so busy with like running the things, right? Once again, about the importance of the engine and the steering wheel. So we run some surveys, and the results were showing that the perception in that country was that Uber was not legal. So no matter the ads to with the call out like download now, free ride, and the first ride is free, etc., would turn that impression around. So we said, okay, connecting then the incrementality testing, or rather study, because it wasn't necessarily a test, but more like on and off and see what happens with the findings. Then we got best of both worlds, and we still say, okay, then in that country specifically, why don't we use some of that saved budget into building a bit in consideration awareness? So we flipped the script and shifting away from this acquisition only paid media focus into then your typical, obviously, okay, what is the message? Like, then we start shifting to different channels. We start shifting into some of the campaigns that you may have seen, obviously, in or heard of in London and the UK around safety, like this bigger, bolder brand campaigns to really tackle specifically the problem or a perception or like awareness was not a problem, right? We all knew that. Like the awareness for Uber was not, but the type of awareness was a problem in consideration. Absolutely. So that's the type of shift, like this whole single individual test or experimentation, if you wish, sparked a number of different exciting things. Like we start building our first attribution, a projection, right? So we started projecting, okay, if a channel converts here, what can we expect in 2 months from now? Right? We start building those projection models as a global organization. That's one. Two, we start shipping again how we're thinking budget away from every dollar needs to have a return to okay, what country needs what? We start clustering countries into, okay, this is a country where we feel like we need to invest in building that awareness or the consideration. This is a country where we need to maybe fight competition. This is a country where we need to just like, okay, the interest is there, like just capture it, on and on and on. So that is the beauty of when you have size, great talent, a big problem to solve, and complexity, but most importantly, leadership that trusts you and also is not afraid of making bold, because that at the time was a massively bold risk in a heartbeat. Like Dimitri to this day, definitely a clear example of amazing leadership.
That's incredible. But this was a few years into Uber's journey, right? This was 6, 7 years in.
This was I've been at Uber 2016, 2019. So I joined. I always like to call it. I joined at the tail end of the crazy days, and I joined basically the beginning of the new phase of Uber, right? So I've obviously with Dara joining and kind of reshaping the organization, but also again still the fun last days of the OGs, and again incredible problems with obviously the acquisition of the launch of Eats in EMEA, the launch of Uber for Business in EMEA, and the acquisition of Jump Scooter. So again, about 3 years in the company, but I've seen a lot of exciting things.
Incredible. I don't know if you can, but I'd love to go a little bit more into what you saw in the metrics for you to have this like red flag. Like what were the numbers that you were looking at? And I think that probably will be the last question because we're almost at time.
I would say it was a lot of, in that case, if you remember, for the magnitude of the budget and the complexity, Uber was fantastic when it comes to data because, as you know, the data was accessible to everybody, right? We had a lot of freedom into playing with the data, but a lot of stuff you have to build yourself, right? Which is usually good and the bad, right? So I didn't feel that maybe because also the novelty, obviously coming from a completely different world. Like I didn't feel comfortable. It was more of a hunch than more like metrics. I think metrics wise was the curiosity around the channel mix. At the time, the rides business, so mostly focusing on the acquisition of riders, was mostly driven by display advertising. And when I say mostly, I'm talking from memory in the 70% or so. All right. Organic was a bit for sure. But if you're talking paid media, like, affiliate was not really existent. Search was really not a lot. It was mostly display. And again, this is the first time in every B2C company I've been in. At that time, Uber was company number 4 or 5, an outlier for me. So that was the one metric. Now, I took it at the beginning as okay, maybe that's the way things run in mobility. That's the way maybe things run. So I kind of like kept to myself a little bit. But then when that hums keeping me up at night, I'm like, there's something off here. So what I didn't take it as, hey, there's something wrong here, but rather like there's something here that I don't understand. And if I don't understand it, then I validated with, again, the person in my team that was lead for display, which was Hannah, right? Which obviously also, again, good talent. So I'm like, Hannah, what do you feel about it? Like, he's like, I haven't seen it either. Okay, then that's a flag, right? So then instead of saying this is a problem, well, why don't we test it? What do we have to lose, right? So as long as well, we have obviously put some return at risk, but as long as we treat this in as way, hey, this is a potential opportunity to save and be more efficient, and that's how I position it to Pierre and Pierre Dimitri. And as long as he was okay with it, let's go with it. Like, learning is vital here. So, and I think having that culture was obviously what enabled everything. But it was less metrics and more of a, I would say, I guess my advice to people that join a new company is don't accept what you're seeing. I know it's everybody says that, right? But even if you have a hunch, if something that doesn't feel right, like, trust your judgment, use your experience in the past, and don't drive for change. Don't drive for like, okay, I don't like this one. It's not how I want to do it. I want to do it differently. But like, be curious and say, okay, this doesn't feel right. Can we test it? I've been in, again, many companies already. Like, Uber is, to this day, is the only company that I've been able to do 2 things. One, completely in-house a team from fully agency-led to fully in-house led, because when I left, the team had no agency support whatsoever, which, again, nothing wrong with it. With agencies, they definitely do play an important role. But that was the only company to this day that was able to do it so quickly. And then the only company to this day that was able to like turn off such a magnitude spend on a heartbeat in a 30 minutes meeting. That goes back to the point that I doubt that that's going to happen again in the future. But who knows? Maybe. But it was such a pivotal example of risk-taking, data-driven curiosity, drive change that hard to beat.
Thanks so much for sharing. I know we've talked about, I have a similar story and exactly the same thing. And I'm sure you're bringing all of that as now the CMO and a marketing leader, that culture, the data drivenness. So Mattia, we could keep going. This is amazing. Thank you for sharing your stories. The B2B versus B2C differences were really, really eye-opening. And again, sharing the Uber story. It's good to revisit those days.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks, Mattia. Thanks for tuning into Experimental. If today's insights sparked new ideas or made you feel like a smarter marketer, consider leaving a review on your preferred podcast platform. It really helps support the show. For more in-depth discussions and resources, visit experimental.beehive.com. Until next time, be curious and stay experimental.